Hey everybody, thanks for joining today's conversation. My name is Dr. Chad Stevens. I'm the head of growth and partnerships here at ClassDojo for Districts, and I'm super excited for the conversation today between myself and Maritza Gallaga from Manor ISD. Sorry, I should know that, fellow Texan. Um, we're going to talk today about more than messages, how strong communication builds trust and belonging in schools, and talk about how the heart and what keeps our school community connected. And Manor ISD has done an amazing job there. We see hundreds of messages a week as a school leader. But really, what makes those messages matter is how do we make sure families feel seen, staff feel supported, our schools feel united, even when it's super busy. So we're excited to have Maritza here. She's the exec director of communications again in Manor ISD in Texas. And she's really known for leading with empathy and clarity and building communication systems that don't just inform families, but really connect them. And we had the pleasure of meeting face to face not too long ago in Houston, and got to meet Maritza's superintendent and her, and we're excited to have you on the podcast. So, Maritza, welcome. I guess just tell us a little bit about your district, a little bit about Manor, your location, and kind of your current role as the executive director of communications.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome and the lovely words. So, as you said, my name is Maritza Gallaga. I am the executive director of communications. So, day to day, I mean, it looks like what it looks like for a lot of district leaders, especially in communications. You're a jack of all trades. You have to be able to manage the comm systems, be ready for anything that may appear, and have to tackle day to day issues, but also supporting your campuses too and getting their messages out and supporting your district as well. Manor is super unique in its population. It's very diverse for the area. We are very close to Austin. I mean, literally a street separates us,
Mhm.
which is really cool because you get both people who live and work in Austin because that's where our district lies. But you also get the people in Manor who are a very tight knit community. We have a very diverse population as well, which makes the need for a service like ClassDojo and especially the translation service ever so needed. But that's our community nutshell. But as far as what we focus on as a department, it's that transparency and honesty and being as proactive as possible. We know that with a tight knit community comes a community who wants to know and be in the know. And so that's really our goal is to keep them connected with us and tailor our goals to them.
That's awesome. So you talked a little bit about y'all's approach to district communication. Talk talk a little bit about like what strong communication means to you, and kind of like why does it matter right now in today's kind of climate in schools?
You're going to hear me say open and honest a lot because that's really what strong communication is. It's being open and honest. I think, and I'm going to get to this as far as like what it helped builds, but I think it just really helps build that trust because we're at a point in time where the relationship matters now more than ever. People need to have that relationship with their schools to be an advocate for their schools, to support their schools. And that plays into so many things like bond elections and just overall day to day support for your schools, which absolutely need it. So, strong communication to me is open and honest, it's proactive, it's trying to empathize with your community as much as possible. What do they need to know and how do they need to know it? And what language are they speaking? I think
Mhm.
we as educators sometimes can get into very edgy speak. And so it's really identifying like how can we talk to our community in a way that they understand and through a channel that they're going to receive it as. So strong communication is tailored to your community, it's open and honest, and it's proactive.
Love
And why
that.
it's important, I'm sorry, I didn't even get to the why it's important, but
Go for
it's to build
it.
those advocates. I mean, your public school districts thrive and we thrive when you have that relationship with your community. You're going to show support. So it's not only like at your football games, but it's when it's talking about your school district, talking to it about other people, talking to it about election season, and just really day to day. It really builds just that sense of community and overall advocacy and support.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think, the real culmination of how the community feels about their schools really happens at the school, right? And like building up that kind of groundswell and going from there. Um, so families are juggling a lot. There's a lot going on. You talked about it. I've been through Manor. I know, you're just a little bit west is Austin, a little bit east, like you're in terms of where you're at. And so are like the school teams. So what have you found helps messages like break through the noise and actually reach families where they're at? You know,
So you kind of summed it up there. It's reaching them where they're at. Like we know that when it comes down to it, my phone's always nearby me, and that's what our it's my kid. That's what's blurred out. But that's what our families have access to. It's their phones. And we have to think about the way that our families receive information and what they're going to pay attention to. I think with the trends in media, that it's coming down to shorter messaging, it's coming down to visuals. So it's about me reading, or excuse me, reaching them in that tool with their cell phones and short messaging that they can understand. And also, we like to reach them through their campuses as well, depending on the message, just because they have a stronger relationship with their campus community than they do like a Manor ISD. We're kind of as much as we give valuable information for them because they're such in that bubble, we can be a talking head sometimes. So utilizing those relationships with the campus and having the campuses help us get that message out is awesome. It helps kind of build a bridge when people don't have time and people don't have accessibility because they're juggling their jobs, they're juggling taking care of their children, they're juggling those after school activities. So it leaves them very little time to be able to sit down and read a long message that you've drafted. You got to make it short, palatable bites,
right.
basically.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I think we live in this kind of world of small sound bites of information that you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. I'm going to dig into that later. Or you bookmark it, or you flag it in your social media. And I think school comms is having to adapt from like, when I was a principal, like this big letter from the principal that, has all this information that nobody might read versus like lots of quick hit
Yeah,
type things. So you talked about transparency and building trust, and how, and making communication open and honest, especially when things get challenging. So, like, what are some ways that you do that? Like, like, are there some how-tos of building that trust? What are some things that Vayner's done that you think have been particularly successful that some of the folks that are here on the webinar can take back home with them?
for sure. And for me, it's all about working backwards, right? And thinking about, you have to always think about like the future. As much as people in school comms have to think about their day to day, because a lot of your work lies day to day. But a lot of times it's thinking about the future and the impact. And it's when you get to that future decision, asking yourself, is your community going to say, "Well, I didn't know anything about that. Why is this decision or this direction being taken now?" So our goal is to build that narrative. And an example that I can give is especially when it comes to, I mean, every school district can feel this right now, budgetary constraints. It's about building that narrative as early as you can on why this is taking place, what the potential impacts are, and what you can expect to see. To where as the conversations take place throughout the spring and then ultimately your decision in June, which is when most people adopt their budgets, we know why some of these cuts were made or if what some of the changes had to be in order to adopt a balanced budget, which so many people are having to do. We've done that the past few years, which has been pretty successful. Just giving people a heads up of what's going on, allowing people to have opportunities and host those community meetings throughout that process to be a part of that conversation as well. But the earlier that you can get to them, the better. And also, not shying away from that open and honesty. I would love to and to just be sunshine and lollipops because I truly believe in the mission of public ed and the things that happen in in our classrooms. But when it comes to these challenging subjects, you have to be real with people. People don't
Right.
want to say they didn't know about something. You got to be honest because ultimately those decisions lie on you and those decisions do impact trust when someone says they don't know about it or they don't understand the why. Um, so that's how I like to think about it. I like to work backwards, and I like to think about what's every possible opportunity, um, to give someone to build their knowledge of something that ultimately is going to make or break that trust. I think you and I want to touch back on something that you said. You talked about that long letter that principals would send, and I think there's a time and a place for it, because that's something that some people are always going to go back and be like, you know what, I do want those nitty gritty, but for most, it's going
Yep.
to be those details. But it's
Yep.
providing, or excuse me, those short sound bites. But for some, it's still having that information there because you wanna say that I've done everything that I could to provide someone the information that they need to understand exactly what's going on, because ultimately it impacts them as well.
I love that. I mean, yeah, I think multimodal communication is always important, whether you're in a school district or inside a company like ClassDojo. Like making sure that everybody has the information in a bunch of different ways is kind of the most effective way. So it sounds like you guys do a pretty good job of getting everybody on the same page. It sounds like, like teachers, principal, district staff. You just kind of talked about it, but are there ways that you build? How do you build like consistency? Like there's all these messages going out across the district. Like how do you kind of get that band to march in place between the district level, the school level, the teacher level? How do you think about that as a communications leader?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard task. I mean, everyone is kind of just trying to make so much happen. But I think the best way to look about it is like our ideology when it comes to comms is that it starts from internal and it goes to external. Because the last thing you want is to do something, to have this big decision made, and then when you're asking the people at the campus level, they have no clue what you're talking about. They don't know the background, they don't know anything, and then it just kind of like, well, I don't know what's going on. That's the last thing that you want to hear as a parent. That's the last thing you want to hear as someone a community member coming from the outside who wants to learn more. So how we try and combat that is really working from that inside out when we launch our a series of communication regardless of the topic. So we like to almost give or not almost, we do. We give our principals a playbook of what to share when it comes to for them, the memo, like a memo for them, almost talking points that they can share with different groups and different sets of languages that make it a little more to understand. Because ultimately, like the principals need to know how it impacts this particular group. What can I share? And this particular group, what can I share? So anytime we make a pretty big decision, we do like to take that approach to make sure messaging and language is consistent. Because that's really the goal at the end. It's to build a common language and a common knowledge source of what's taking place in your district.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, that's really cool. Love that. So, you've talked a little bit about in the beginning about belonging and like showing up in small ways. You talked about football games and like just community in general. Have you seen communication or how does communication contribute to that kind of sense of belonging of like being part of Manor ISD, the brand Manor? How do you think about that?
I think when it comes down to like building a relationship, it really comes down to how connected do you feel with the organization that you belong to, right? And it's about hearing from them. And I don't necessarily think it's hearing from Manor ISD. I do think it's hearing from their campuses because that's where it starts, right? They live in this little bubble that starts with their
Mhm.
campuses and then it extends onto the district. And that's the goal. It's we want them to love their neighborhood schools, but we also want them to acknowledge that we're part of this big umbrella. We're part of this one big family. So part of that is really working with our principals to give them tips and give them best practices on how to really just reach out to their communities and what the frequency should be depending on their community, what that messaging should look like. For an example, we have a new principal at one of our campuses, Bluebonnet Trail, and he really loves those short, snappy messages and he loves doing them daily. So we've worked with him to be able to create his plan basically on how he's gonna share these messages every day, keep the content fresh to where the community is want or his community is really wanting to connect with him, but also he is great with us and he kind of tease it back off to Manor ISD to learn more. So he integrates part of his campus specific messaging with also our district messaging. So it's almost a two for one in building that connectedness with his campus and our district as well. So it's about working with your principals, seeing their communication styles and finding something that works with them. I think what's awesome about, school districts is it's never, as much as you want things to be, because it kinda makes life easier, it's never going to be a cookie cutter situation. Your different communities are gonna want different things, your different principals are gonna have different strengths, and so it's about finding something that utilizes them, but giving them best practices to be able to do that.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's the a great way to look at it. I mean, as a former teacher, you talk about, differentiated instruction and doing different, making sure you're hitting the needs of the kids. And as a comm leader, you have to hit the needs of of your principals and how comfortable they are. Some people love all the social media stuff, and some people, don't. And so you got to kind of meet them where you. I think what I heard you say is you kind of have to meet them where they are, which is really cool. And yeah, I would agree. I think schools, parents, again, I talked about at the beginning, the way they feel about their school district oftentimes starts
Mhm.
with how they feel about their individual classroom, and that's where they're spending so much of their time. And so I think that's one of the really cool, unique things about some of the things that Class Dojo has been able to do over the years is like have that classroom space like that. Well,
Yeah.
it's Thanksgiving next week, so we're talking about gratitude and giving thanks. I'd love to learn like how you like weave appreciation and celebration into your comms practices in Manor ISD, and how do you lift up people, or any creative ideas that you can share with the audience about that piece?
I think as a school comms person, celebrating is always at your top of mind because we know more than anyone, and well, not more than anyone. That's unfair. There's a lot of great people who work in public ed, but our goal is to celebrate the great things that are happening, and so I think that's part of the core mission of people who work in comms. It's how can we get those notes of celebration to our community, and again, it's having those little snip snaps of celebrations that you can. So we've implemented something called Manor Monthly, and it's just bite-sized celebrations and almost like an online flip book that you can get, and it's accessible through our socials, accessible through our emails, but that's how we show quick snips of appreciation. And then also just having different celebrations every month where we ask our audience to come to help nominate and to help celebrate the staff members and the students who help make it possible. And I think that's just on the external end. But when we talk about internal comms specifically, we do like to show gratitude for our staff because they're the ones who make everything possible. So we do that in a few different ways. So we have an internal newsletter that goes out every month to staff members that it's just sharing the great notes that we hear about staff members and it's celebrating them.
That's
People who
cool.
work at the schools, people who work at the district level. It's about nominating someone that you've just seen exemplifying our district ideology of serve people, solve problems, and lead with integrity. And so we do that every month. And also, our superintendent every month has a monthly message, and we always pick a new campus and we always pick a new leader, a teacher, a student who just exemplifies just one of those qualities. And like this month, he picked a student who just walked through the hall and offered him lunch. He led with kindness, and we pivoted our monthly message really quickly because that was just something that I think touched Dr. Sermani and touched us in a way that we see those leadership qualities in our students to where we just like threw away a message and we totally went with a new one just based on what we see. But it's about finding those opportunities too. I
Yeah.
mean, we see them every day, but it's about capitalizing on them. And capitalizing sounds like a terrible word, but it's about just showing them. Because
Mhm.
those moments are what make public school special, and I think they deserve to be shown off every day and in every way that we can.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much good happening in schools, public schools across the United States every day. And the last, 4 or 5 years I've been focused on family engagement and communications, and it's cool that these tools are helping to share that, because I think, we didn't always have that ability to share all the good stuff that's going on like we do today, where it's easier to get things. And so it's awesome. And like I think about stuff like that as a former principal of, you just never know how that impacts that student. Like they're going to want to go do more acts of kindness now,
For
and you never
sure.
know like kind of how far that act of kindness will go into the future, because the school district celebrated it and the superintendent knew about it.
Absolutely. I think
So
even
I
just
think,
I mean, for an example of that day, like pivoting that message and saying like, "Hey, like, Armando, thank you so much for that act of kindness. Like, we're gonna feature you on social." And I mean, he was the
yeah,
beam with pride that you see. That's something that he just wasn't expecting, and he was just so proud to tell us about that his mom made the lunch that he offered our superintendent and just share his story with us. So again,
yeah,
it's that and just like it made his day, and who knows how it can impact the rest
Yeah.
of his week and his school year. But
Yeah.
it's just awesome to be able to see those things every day.
Plants a seed. And I think, I think that's what schools are about, like, kind of helping kids grow and planting that idea that, that this is a great thing. So that's very cool. So a couple more questions here before we wrap. So, one of the things that as we launched these webinars around um, comms leaders is, given some practical applications. So like for a couple takeaways, like for district leaders joining us today, what's one small change that they could make this month to strengthen communication or connection across their schools? Any pointers?
For us, we've really, I think we've gone from let's explain as much as we can to let's focus on explaining one process per month. And what that means, it's like this month is safety, where our messaging is related to like, did you know what terminology means at your campus? So what does a lockdown, a secure mode, what does a hold mean? And it means getting them a newsletter from our chief of police who's going to explain what we're doing to keep our students safe. And then that next month, it's talking a little bit more about SPED and how what we do for our students and also how you can take advantage to that. Because I think for us, when you try to explain so much and so often, the messages
Mhm.
often get lost. And so I say one process a month is a very in an ideal world, right? So we try as much as possible to stick with that, but understanding that, of course, the needs of your district kind of dictate where
Right,
you
yeah,
go. Everything. It's a day can look different. Every day it looks different. But that's something that we've tried to incorporate. It's how can we slow down to explain the process as much as we can versus shoving as much information into people's faces as possible. It's being more intentional with stuff like that.
that's awesome. And finally, what's one message you'd love every family in your district to hear or feel when they receive communications from the school?
I think every message, whether it comes from your campus or if it comes from us, it's meant to support you. It's meant to allow you not only to feel connected, but and to understand what's going on, but it's to know that our goal is to serve you by providing you the information that you need to better serve your child, the better information you need to help advocate for your schools if you wish to do so, to take advantage of our services, and ultimately to work together to provide the best education possible for your child. We're a team, and that team to be a team requires communication, and that's the goal of every communication that you receive from campuses in our district.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think creating that, you said the word team, and I think that's kind of the approach is, you know, parents, families are part of the team that's trying to ultimately get that student, onto graduation and onto, work or college or whatever it is that that student, is has in their mind as a goal. So that's amazing. Well, sadly, we're at the end of our time. That 30 minutes went really fast, and I'm so excited that we got to do this after we met. But thank you so much. Those were some awesome, thoughtful practice. Hopefully, some insights that you can take back. And I really want to thank everybody that joined today. If you take one thing away, let it be this. Every message is an opportunity to build trust and show gratitude. That's kind of what I heard Maritza say. And communication needs to feel human. It needs to feel consistent. And if you do those things, like belonging will follow. So we'll send a replay um, out of this webinar straight to your inbox tomorrow. If you'd like to learn how ClassDojo for Districts can help your school create clear, connected, and gratitude-filled communication systems, we'd love to connect. We've made some very large announcements in the last few days, and we're very excited about the things that we're adding to ClassDojo for Districts. Before we go, we are going to share a quick survey that's going to pop up on your screen. Um, Please complete this before you leave this webinar. I think I just saw it pop up. Until next time, thank you all for what you do, keeping your school community strong, informed, and inspired. And we can't wait to see you for our next webinar in December. Thank you.